enjoying dinner. It's really lovely. I'm Rick Zatola, Chair of ACEC New York and partner of Lyra Consulting Structural Engineers. I'm pleased to welcome you to the 2022 Winter Conference. Thanks. I'd like to give many thanks to all of you who are here in person, as well as those who are joining by video conference. How many of you out there have come up from Long Island? All right, Long Island, where you had anywhere from 12 inches to 24 inches of snow, right? Well, I want to say the following on behalf of all members, but particularly for Long Islanders. Neither snow nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of pandemic stays ACEC New York members from providing value to the people of New York through our service. This time last year, we were all attending this conference virtually. However, beginning in May with John Paul Cunningham's Mid-Hudson Region event, we have been assertive in promoting and offering safe live programs all throughout the year, I might add. And I must say, though, the past couple of years have been rough with surge after surge of COVID. It is remarkable that we are fortunate to meet here tonight. Many of us have experienced directly or know someone who experienced directly the passing of a loved one due to COVID. So please, let's have a brief moment of silence for those less fortunate. This year, the theme of our conference is Building for the Future, a timely and relevant theme given the recent passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The Winter Conference has always been a great venue for collaboration, idea sharing, professional development, and relationship building in support of the built environment in New York State. You make this conference great simply by coming here and participating, so thank you for that. And if you don't know already, you should be very proud of the influence and importance that ACEC has as a thought leader in New York State, as well as on the national level through ACEC. Know that your voice matters. So let us unofficially declare strength through thought leadership as a sub-theme for this conference, but also as a sub-theme for the remainder of the year and going forward. Say it often, say it proudly. We are thought leaders in this industry. Now to the critically important part of the conference. Part of relationship building is establishing connections with those businesses and services that make our jobs possible. We have 18 exhibitors participating on our expo floor this year. If you haven't yet, be sure to visit an exhibit booth and make a connection. It's really important to us. They're doing good work. I want to take a moment to thank some of our sponsors. Please hold your applause until I've read all of the sponsors. First, thank you to ACEC Business Insurance Trust for sponsoring tonight's welcome dinner. A special thank you to our Winter Conference Diamond sponsor, Zetlin and DiChiara. Thank you also to Grassy CPAs for sponsoring our hotel key cards, PKF O'Connor Davies for sponsoring our tote bags, Prudent Engineering for sponsoring our conference lanyards. Risk Strategies companies will sponsor the hospitality tonight and tomorrow night. And thank you to Friedman, Infotran Engineers, and Foyt Albert Associates for advertising in our printed program. And lastly, thank you to our mobile app sponsor, the ACEC Retirement Trust. While we have provided a printed program, you can access the agenda with up-to-minute changes, speaker bios, session details, handouts, and more through the user-friendly app. If anyone needs assistance, feel free to ask one of the ACEC New York staff members for help. Now, please give a hand to all of our sponsors. As in previous years, be sure to participate in the App Challenge, which awards points for uploading photos based on certain criteria. The photos must be taken through the app to count. All of the top point leaders will be entered into a drawing to win one of 2 special prizes. So get competitive and get out there and take photos. Winners will be announced through an app alert on Monday during lunch and on Tuesday morning. As a reminder, the Wi-Fi password is ACECNY22. That's ACECNY22. As we've done previously, one of the challenges in the app is to take a photo with the sculpture, which I'm sure most of you noticed down by registration. We have again partnered with the Capital Region Construction to showcase their program and raise donations. All cans will be donated to the food pantries for the Capital District. Additionally, monetary donations are currently being accepted electronically. Just scan the QR code on the poster by the sculpture and make a difference in our community during this very difficult time. Many thanks to the build team for their work in coordinating and building that sculpture. And a special thanks to Jill Shorter of Ryan Biggs, Clark Davis, chair of the PR committee, for her leadership and support in this endeavor. And speaking of leadership, one of the key focuses of ACEC New York has always been to encourage the next generation to pursue careers in engineering. I'd now like to turn the program over to the president of ACEC New York. He's also the treasurer of ACEC New York Scholarship and thought leader extraordinaire, Johnny Evers.
Well, thank you, Rick. Good evening, everyone. I'm John Evers, chair of ACEC New York, and I'm proud to announce that in 2021, coinciding with the 100th anniversary of the organization, the ACEC New York Scholarship Fund achieved an overall goal of awarding over $1 million in scholarships to hundreds of exceptional engineering students attending New York State colleges and universities since the program's inception in 2002. We recognize the latest class of recipients through a video campaign on our social media channels, which were then used to create a new promotional video for the Scholarship Fund, which we will show you shortly. We are excited to recognize 2 of these high-achieving students tonight. Please share that video.
I personally believe we always have an obligation to pay it forward. We are stewards of a infrastructure legacy left to us by the people who came before us, and we are going to leave that legacy, the current legacy, to the future generation. They need to be ready, to make sure that that legacy does not get squandered and that they are good stewards of our infrastructure.
I am a lifelong New Yorker and spent my whole life falling in love with the infrastructure that helps make this city so great.
I'm excited to help build new and innovative projects that will be sustainable and efficient while inspiring future engineers.
Since the program's launch in 2002, ACEC New York has awarded 352 scholarships and other donations, totaling $1,021,500. The scholarship program was implemented to support up-and-coming engineers, thereby guaranteeing a strong future for the profession in New York State.
ACEC New York scholarship has really impacted my career in the fact that it's been a 20-year odyssey through my college life and professional life. I've not only received the scholarship while I was in college, as part of that scholarship interview process, I was introduced to my future employer and who I've been with since I graduated college through this. So it's very near and dear to my heart, and it is very much a foundation of my career. The networking component of ACEC New York and the scholarship group and committee, it's tremendous. It's one of the few times in your career as a student that you will have the opportunity to be in front of several companies. And we're not talking about several people within one company or people earlier in a career in those companies. We're talking about in the top of their companies. People who are principals of their firms are part of the scholarship committee. They're going to see your resume. They're going to see all aspects of things that you've written about in your essays. They're going to see your transcripts. This is, if you're talking about an advertising about yourself, this is one of the few moments where a little bit of work will get you way out in front of so many different companies throughout the whole industry.
Congratulations to the Scholarship Committee for reaching their goal of over $1 million in collective scholarships by 2021 in honor of ACEC New York's centennial celebration. And sincerest thanks to the ACEC New York scholarship donors for their generosity.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great honor to please welcome Sierra Marie Kegler.
Hi, everyone. I wasn't told I was supposed to make a speech, so yes, it'll be very short. I just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate getting this award. It helps me further my education at RIT, where I'm studying mechanical engineering. So thank you for allowing me to be here tonight and giving me this scholarship so that I can graduate.
Well, congratulations. Thanks to the ongoing efforts of the Scholarship Committee, in 2022, at least 20 students will receive scholarships between $2,500 and $10,000. I personally want to thank not only the committee members for their ongoing promotion of the scholarship to students and for reviewing applications, but also those generous firms whose donations make the fund possible. The future of engineering depends on our actions today, and your support today means a better world for all of us tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny, and congratulations to you and to Sierra. Youth is so important to our industry, isn't it? And the diversity of youth is so important to our industry, isn't it? Through ACEC New York's thought leadership, a new initiative was launched this year to recognize the efforts of firms regarding diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. The ACEC New York HR Committee took the lead in this initiative, launching a fantastic program track that started in 2021, in the 2021 virtual winter conference, and encompassed 4 virtual programs over 6 months. These sessions focused on important topics such as unconscious bias, gender in the workplace, LGBTQ+ and gender expression, and encouraging diversity in the next generation of engineers. Resources from each of these programs are available on the ACEC New York website. And I am also happy to announce that these efforts have been recognized with an award from the best member, an award for Best Member Engagement from the Empire State Society of Association Executives. I think that's worth a little bit of applause. These initiatives were a true group effort. With the members of the HR committee in attendance tonight, please stand if you are able and be recognized. Many thanks to all of you for your important work and congratulations on your award. 2 people truly went above and beyond in setting up these programs and supporting the efforts of the HR committee. Diana Kaufman, Director of Human Resources for CNS Companies, and Kathy Metcalf, Chief Culture Officer for CPL. Were both instrumental in launching these programs, including obtaining and organizing speakers and confirming timely and important topics. Please welcome to the podium the co-chairs of the HR Committee, Diana Kaufman and Kathy Metcalf.
A few years ago, this committee was brand new, maybe 4 years.
Yeah.
Kathy was at the helm, and over time, we've really developed our offerings. Last year, as Ray mentioned, we had a series of DEI sessions recognizing that we really couldn't do justice to the topic in an hour and a half of time. We rolled out a program that was well received, trying to meet the criteria that you provided us when we surveyed you. What did you want to see? And yeah, when it was all done, we were asked, what's next? So here we are, here's what's next. Tomorrow we have a very engaging speaker for our keynote discussion at lunchtime, Kyle Young-Moncourt. And we're really excited about that. Afterward, we have a panel discussion with 6 panelists, all representing all different aspects of diversity. We encourage, in fact, I think I'd go so far to say as we request that you attend. We think it'll be really a very rich conversation, very educational, a lot of takeaways personally, and those that you can put into effect at your own firms. And I guess I'd say if there are more than one of you from your firm, perhaps you could work out a way to have one of you attend this session. We think it'll be really engaging, and we would love to have as many people there as possible. The questions are invaluable, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Congratulations. Congratulations. Oh, we're not ready for the photograph yet. Thank you. So, don't go away. Thank you, Diana and Kathy. Before you sit, we have a small surprise for you. Diana, in recognition of your efforts, ACEC has donated $250 to the Boys and Girls Club of Syracuse in your name.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And I believe you're on the board of directors, is that right? Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much.
You're,
That's awesome.
Thank you very much. Additionally, Kathy, in recognition of your efforts, ACEC has donated $250 in your name to the United Way of Greater Rochester. You're welcome. Well, thank you both for all that you've done in organizing and helping our industry. Thank you very much. Takes it. Cool. Well, I'll tell you, I'm just the lucky person who was able to present those certificates. And I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my predecessor, Ray DiDazio, from whom I've learned so much. Diana's and Kathy's team began their work during his term, and I don't think I speak out of term to say that this was a very important program to Ray. So thank you, Ray. Continuing on the theme of DEI and B, sometime late last winter, early spring, following a Metro Region meeting, Hannah O'Grady, remember Hannah, sent a teaser up to the Albany leadership. She said, hey, something came up in our meeting that I think you should be handling on the state level, not the city level. Well, Denise Carter, through a leader extraordinaire, thought leader extraordinaire, suggested we have a member firm DEI and B award. I think Denise was more than a bit surprised at how quickly we jumped on that opportunity and said, yes, let's do it. But she was probably not more surprised than when we quickly jumped on the opportunity to ask her to be the chair of the committee. And so she did, and I'd like to invite Denise to the podium.
That's always a challenge with making a suggestion, right? A lot of times you end up leading the charge. So thank you, Rick, and good evening, everyone. My name is Denise Carter. I'm Chief Strategy Officer for GPI and Chair, as you all know, of the newly formed Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee of ACEC New York. So as Rick said, last spring, I approached ACEC New York with the idea to promote DEIB through an awards program. One of my GPI colleagues was involved with ACEC Pennsylvania, which had launched a similar awards program. So given the success of the DEIB program series offered by ACEC New York earlier this year, with the folks graciously recognized, I believe that an awards program to highlight this initiative would be a perfect fit for the organization, especially, where we are right now with issues of equity and inclusion at the highest priority level. So I'm excited to announce that the inaugural year of this awards program was more successful than any of us could ever have imagined. We received an unexpectedly large number of award applicants, showcasing amazing initiatives from firms of every size and from across the entire state. And it's my pleasure to recognize those award winners tonight. The award application outlined certain criteria to be considered for recognition. The criteria included level of advancement of DEIB and engagement with DEIB within the firm, quantifiable effect on retention and recruitment, quantifiable effect on workplace culture and employee behaviors, quantifiable effect on company performance, and quantifiable effect on the industry and the community. And of course, consultants, we love to know the selection criteria, right, so we know what we're trying to do. All right. We spent a lot of time on that. So the entries from every firm were very detailed and complex, really impressive. And ACEC New York is thrilled to showcase the great work our members have done in service of DEIB. Each entry was evaluated by a panel of third-party judges related to the built environment in New York, based on the criteria I just detailed. And if you want to take a look at the full write-up from each of our award winners, you can visit the ACEC New York website or click the link in the mobile app. It was important for us as we sort of envision this to allow everyone the opportunity to take a look at what other folks were doing in this space. So I'm sure you'll be impressed by the significant work our member firms are doing in DEIB. So of all the entries, 9 stood out as exceptional programs that touched upon every aspect of the award criteria. As I call your firm name, if you're present, I ask that the designated firm representative come up to the podium to receive your award. And once you come up, please remain on the stage until all names have been called and a photo has been taken. So the 2022 ACEC New York DEIB Award winners are Brown and Caldwell. Do we have a representative from Brown and Caldwell here? Okay. CNS companies. CNS? Awesome. Gannett Fleming, engineers and architects. JMT of New York. M&J Engineering. Parsons. Thornton Tomasetti. VHB, Engineering, Surveying, and Landscape Architecture. And WSP, USA. Please join me in congratulating our DEIB award-winning firms. We're going to do the photo? Oh, here's Bernie. Thank you. So we want to try to do a photo with everyone? Is that... Okay, as I mentioned, our awards committee was very pleased to receive so many applications, and all highlighted the push within the industry to address these important issues. So I'd like to recognize those firms who received an honorable mention for the 2022 DEIB Awards. Again, as I call your firm name, if present, the designated firm rep should come to the podium to receive your certificate. And again, please remain at the front until all the names have been called and a photo has been taken. So for honorable mention, we have AECOM, GHD, Greenman Peterson, Greeley and Hanson, GZA Manhattan, Jacobs, Lyra Consulting, Structural Engineers, Robbie Engineering and Land Surveying, Sam Schwartz, and Stantec Consulting Services. So again, please join me in congratulating our DEIB Award honorable mentions. So with this, the initial success of this inaugural year, ACEC New York is committed to keep the program going into 2023 and beyond. Again, I'd like to thank the committee and ACEC staff for all of their assistance in launching this new program, as well as our panel of judges. Keep your eye on the ACEC New York website and newsletters for information on the nominations for next year's awards. And I encourage everyone to reapply, or if your firm wasn't included this year, we encourage you to apply. And so now I will turn the podium back to our chair. Thank you.
Woohoo! Well, thank you, Denise. I'm proud not only to see such a successful launch of a new program, but also because of the exceptional work of our member firms in bringing new voices to the table, including to the ACEC New York table. These issues are of paramount importance, and we will continue to recognize our firms for their efforts on this front. Now, for the final highlight of this evening, I will introduce our keynote speaker for tonight's event. Thomas DiNapoli was elected state controller on February 7th, 2007, by a bipartisan majority of the state legislature. He was elected controller by New York voters in 2010, 2014, and 2018. That's a very long time. That's about as long as I've known how to pronounce the word controller. Tom is known for his integrity and independence and even-keeled leadership. His record of accomplishments is exemplary. During his term, he has done some of the following: identified billions in waste, fraud, and cost savings in government, uncovered corruption in state and local governments leading to dozens of arrests and tens of millions in restitutions, earned a reputation as one of the leading stakeholder voices in many corporate concerns, including environmental issues, disability inclusion, and corporate political spending. And he led the fight for prudent fiscal and procurement reforms to help New York change how it does business and put it on a better fiscal footing. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Comptroller Thomas DiNapoli. Start Comptroller DiNapoli's presentation off with a few questions.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be with real people.
I have not been in this room for 2 years. We do a lot of events. My office is a block away from here. So it really was great, John, when I got the invitation to, I said, oh, we can go to an actual event. And Rick, I did take the dog sled, and I came up from Long Island to be here. So again, to the Long Islanders, you're a hardy bunch. You're a hardy bunch. We are indeed. Yeah. I appreciated Rick's opening comments to really set the theme for your winter conference, the notion of thought leadership. And certainly a gathering like this presents the opportunity for you to network, reconnect with folks that you know, and make some new connections as well, and share some important thoughts about what is facing your respective professions and the industries you're involved in. I really want to thank John Evers, your president, for having a great relationship with our office. And John and I go way back here in this town, but it's great to be working with you once again. And I really think that in New York, we're very fortunate to have such a very active chapter of ACEC, and certainly, you know, hearing the discussion this evening reinforces that in my mind. And you are a dedicated group of professionals representing consulting engineers across our state geographically, but also folks who are on the front line of the discipline across the spectrum: civil, structural, mechanical, electrical, geotechnical, environmental, surveying, all the long list of concerns relating to your profession. Every day, your combined efforts continue to build a stronger and better New York, from designing highways and bridges, schools and hospitals, key water and wastewater infrastructure. You do so much. Thank you for what you do to help make New York the great state that it is. And I really want to echo the words of appreciation for your efforts with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we all talk about a lot these days. And I appreciate your adding the B in there, the belonging part as well. I think that's an important addition. I may bring that back to my office and say we need to add the B in there. You know, certainly in the wake of the George Floyd killing, we've had to talk about these issues in a different way. And I think for any organization, that includes our organization, the Comptroller's office, 2,700 men and women who work there. We can't be satisfied by what we've done in the past. We can't be satisfied by our aspirational goals. We really have to translate our goals into reality on the ground. And I think in that regard, every organization, whether it's government or business or labor, has so much more work to do. So I think the fact that you've made this such a priority, and I really want to commend Diana and Kathy and Denise and everyone involved with this effort, and to also do it in a positive way, for you to recognize those among you really who are taking the extra step and really showing great progress and success in this area. You know, this is something that we're all going to have to incorporate into our daily lives. So how about another round of applause for all of you for making DE&I and B a reality. And also commend you for the scholarships. You know, John was telling me before the program, and I heard it again, you know, over $1 million since the program began in scholarships. Over 350 scholarship winners. I mean, that's great, and that's really about creating that pipeline, the next generation of professionals who are going to be coming to this winter conference in the years to come. So, you know, just congratulations all around for a great job. Congratulations to Sierra and the other scholarship winners for this year. Sierra gave a great speech considering she wasn't prepared, right? Give her a round of applause. And the one thing I can assure you is that I will not be as brief as Sierra, so sorry about that. Hey, it took me 3 hours to get here. I got to give me time to share some news with you. But I think it is a good time for us to talk. And as I was saying at the table before I came up, you know, for a change, more of what I have to say is good news, right? And some of this is good news you know already, so I'll just maybe fill in a little bit more of the detail and the blanks of some of what you already know. You know, 2 years ago, when all this crazy time we've been going through began, none of us could have imagined where we'd be at today. You know, certainly even when this started and we saw how serious it was from a public health perspective, who would have thought that 2 years later, you know, we'd still be having our masks and debating vaccinations and everything else that we've been going through. But it's also very clear that even if you go back less than 2 years, if I was talking to you a year ago, even probably 6 or 7 months ago, I would have been telling you about very dire concerns and consequences of where we thought the economic impact on government revenues would be with the COVID-19 pandemic. But we're in a different spot right now, different spot than we had projected. And although we're certainly not out of the woods by any means, you know, and to the earlier point, I hope you are all and your families are safe and well and will continue to be. But certainly from a public health perspective, it appears that Omicron has peaked. We don't know what's around the corner next. But there's no doubt that our economy has been recovering. You saw the recent national numbers were incredibly high in terms of economic growth and activity. We are in a recovery mode. It's certainly what we see from the perspective of the State Comptroller's Office. Does it mean we're back where we were pre-pandemic? No. Is the recovery even across the board in the different regions of our state? No, clearly it's not. But there's certainly much more positive than negative of late. And the reality is, because so much, as you could appreciate from a business perspective, right, we do our planning, you know, based on projections, based on assumptions, we're doing much better than we thought we were going to be doing at this point. So it really is good news. Our state tax collections are coming in higher than anticipated, even higher than the revised budget projections of just a couple of months ago. And certainly, as you know, Governor Hochul presented the executive budget proposal earlier this month, and that proposal reflects the positive momentum that we're seeing across the state. When you look at the different parts of the state budget, and you know, $216 billion budget is a big budget, there's no doubt that one area that's benefiting mightily from our improved condition is infrastructure, broadly defined. And certainly that's something I'll touch on. I know it's of great concern to all of you. When I've had the chance to speak before you in the past and similar groups, you've heard me talk about infrastructure on a regular basis. We've identified this going back a number of years as truly one of the unmet needs in our state. We're an older state. We have thousands of roads, bridges, water systems that need repair, replacement, enormous price tag. We've done so many reports. Some of you remember our Cracks in the Foundation report of a number of years ago. We've updated that, always doing reports on infrastructure and always pointing out the needs that are there, not just in terms of the price tag, but the need for us to do a better job in New York of being strategic, to have long-term capital planning so that we can have smart investments and a responsible use of managing our debt and our capital program. And in that regard, I'm really grateful to ACEC New York for your advocacy on these issues as well. You know, we've drawn strength from the comments that you've made and the advocacy that you put on these issues. So, fueled by this massive infusion of dollars coming from the Federal Infrastructure Investing in Jobs Act, $1.2 trillion nationwide, for our state and particularly for New York City, but really for all of our localities, really we are well positioned for the first time in anyone's recent memory to finally make significant headway on our long list of pressing infrastructure needs. We know that this has been an issue, but when you saw what happened in Pittsburgh just the other day, I mean, what a message. The President was arriving to talk about infrastructure, and what happens? I mean, that collapse was I can't say a wake-up call, because I think we know we have these problems. But boy, wasn't that a punctuation as to what we need to do. Thank God no lives were lost, but just think what absolutely could have happened, and just think about the aging infrastructure in our own community, let alone all across our great country. So this is a moment in time that we have to seize upon, and men and women like you in your respective
jobs and where you work, you're going to be on the front lines of delivering on the promise of those dollars. So in terms of our economy, we can measure the steps forward in the continued recovery from the record number of jobs that we lost when the pandemic first hit. You go back to March and April of 2020, we are growing back the jobs that were lost. And we look at different economic indicators. I won't go through them all, but one of the biggest ones in terms of showing the economic activity in our state is looking at local sales tax collections. And that's, again, where we see very strong growth. So in terms of the unemployment rate, looking just for last month, for December, for the state was 6.2%, down from 8.7% a year ago. And back when the pandemic first hit and the economy closed down, depending on which region of the state you were in, you were talking about 15 to 20% unemployment. So it's a big improvement. Are we back to where we were? Are we back to where we want to be? Absolutely not. So we lost nearly 2 million jobs at the depths of the shutdown that was brought on by COVID-19. Now we've grown back about 63% of those jobs. So again, every month we add more, but we still have a ways to go before we get back to where we were before this all began. Some sectors of our economy are performing better than others. Some were performing well even when things were bad. You know, we still depend greatly on Wall Street, on financial services for a significant part of the revenue picture for New York, and even with the volatility in the markets, we know that 2021 was a very strong year for Wall Street. That's good. I always say whether you love Wall Street or you hate Wall Street, when they're doing well, we tax them, and that tax revenue helps us pay for all the other programs that New Yorkers rely on. Financial services accounts for about 18% of all the revenue that comes to New York State. You know, every region of the state is important and contributes in various ways, but there's no doubt that New York City is a very, very important part of the economic engine of the state. The city often is the region that leads us in terms of economic activity, job growth, and taxes. The reality is, because the city was hit so hard and so early by the pandemic, New York City has still been lagging many other regions of the state when we talk about regrowth. The unemployment has been higher in the city, continues to be 8.8% in December, better than the 12% of a year earlier. The city has grown back about 56, 57% of the jobs that were lost. So again, not doing as well as the statewide number. So we need to see more progress. I mentioned sales tax revenue has been strong, an indicator of economic activity, of consumer confidence, pent-up demand, whatever may be accounting for it. But sales tax collections have rebounded significantly, up 17.5% in November of 2021 compared to the same period a year ago. And you may say, Tom, well, 2021 is such a good year, so of course it was going to be higher. But what I think is more demonstrative of the change is that compared to 2019 numbers, pre-pandemic, we're up 9.2% in terms of sales tax collections. So again, shows strength in the economy. One of the great areas of rebound for us has been, I'm very pleased to say as trustee for it, the New York State Pension Fund, the Common Retirement Fund that pays the retirement benefits of 1.1 million New Yorkers who are part of our pension system. We had a record year. We value the fund every March 31st. March 31st, 2021, we were up over 33%. We've never made 33% in 1 year ever in the history of the fund. So we're pleased with that. We're the third largest public pension plan in the nation, and we are over 99% funded. And as you know from following the news, there are very few public pension plans in the country that are in such strong shape, and we've certainly benefited from the markets being strong. We also have been trying to do more. I won't go into great detail on this. If you want in the questions, I can, but we've been trying to direct more of our investment to businesses within New York State. We have some small business lending programs. We have an in-state private equity investment program. We have a particular effort for emerging managers, particularly women and minority firms that are starting out doing investment work. So we're very pleased that we've been doing well with our numbers, but also doing some good things with the money to benefit New York's economy. So if the economy's doing well, what does that mean for state revenue? Well, it means very, very good news. So We do a monthly assessment of state revenue and expenditures. We call it our cash report. And in our December cash report, we found that, and this has been consistent month after month, our revenues are exceeding our projections, and very significantly so. Well over, I think it was $2.7 billion ahead of projections in our last cash report. It's for a combination of reasons. The obvious one I just mentioned, the fact that the economy is recovering and we see better news there. The other reality is that the legislature and the governor in the last session did increase taxes on upper income New Yorkers. And there was a concern, and something I think we need to continue to look at as we move forward. Would those increased taxes result in people leaving the state? That's always a big debate, right? Is New York is a more expensive state? Are we losing our taxpayers because of higher taxes? Well, at least thus far in terms of the money coming in, no, personal income tax collections are actually coming in higher than projected. But the big game changer with regard to the state's revenue picture, without question, is the billions of dollars in new resources that we've gotten from the federal government. The American Rescue Plan has made an incredible difference. And so it's the combination of that economic activity, the increased taxes, the federal dollars that really is the underpinning to the executive budget proposal that Governor Hochul unveiled. So the proposal projects not only a balanced budget, but for the first time, the financial plan attached to the budget forecasts a balance for the longest period of time that we've ever seen. Usually, we have a budget that we seek to put in balance for the coming year, and then there are out-year gaps that we're projecting that we're going to have to deal with when the next budget cycle comes around. It's not the case with where we stand right now. So the governor's made some very important choices on where to invest this money that we have. And one of the areas where I'm particularly pleased that she made a strong commitment, and I'm glad she's taking this opportunity to do this, is that she's building up our reserves. We haven't done a good job in New York of having the money put aside for the rainy days. We're very poor in comparison to other states in that regard. But in the governor's proposal, 15% of state operating funds are going to be set aside to build up our reserves. And that really is heeding some of the recommendations we've made year after year, and it's about time. Is all the news rosy and good? Well, of course not. I think one of the areas where I would say I continue to have concerns, and we'll be speaking more about it down the road, is with regard to our state debt. We're a very highly indebted state in New York, and I've thought for a long time we need to do a better job of managing that debt. It's very clear that we're going to be bumping up against the statutory debt cap very, very soon. By 2026 fiscal year, less than $300 million remaining under the cap. And that's a concern. We really have to have a much more serious policy discussion than we've had in a long time in New York about how to use debt appropriately. It really must be used for capital projects. It really must be tied to our capital assets, to our infrastructure. And we have to be sure we're managing debt at affordable levels. That's a topic for another day. We're working on a debt reform proposal. You'll invite me back and I'll talk at length about that. But it is an area that we really, and unfortunately when I talk about debt reform, that's the snoozer topic generally, right? I mean, it's like, we've done debt reform proposals before, and I went to an editorial board a couple of years ago and they said, how come you don't talk more about debt? You're the state controller. Isn't it a problem? New York has all this debt. I said, yeah. I said, whenever I talk about it, you don't even cover it, and you can't get anybody excited about it, but we're going to try again with it. So with regard to infrastructure, the executive budget makes some very important investments in a host of areas: healthcare, education, the environment, particularly housing. But infrastructure obviously has been a key part of the governor's proposal, and one that certainly concerns you very, very directly. And again, much of this has to do with the benefit of the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So, some of the highlights, some of which you're probably aware, but just to fill in the blanks again: $92 billion 5-year capital plan, a 19% increase over the current plan. $32.8 billion for a new 5-year DOT, Department of Transportation capital plan. That's 40% higher than the last 5-year plan. $25 billion for a new housing capital plan. $5.1 billion in previously approved spending for the MTA, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. $500 million in infrastructure to support the development of offshore wind electric generation. Also, the executive budget proposes to increase the appropriation to the Environmental Protection Fund by $100 million to a record level of $400 million. And while we're on the topic of the environment, the governor is proposing, as you know, there'd been a proposal under the prior administration for an Environmental Bond Act to be voted on this November. The governor is reintroducing that proposal, but increasing the overall cost of it from $3 billion to $4 billion and renaming it, instead of the Restore Mother Nature Environmental Bond Act, which was kind of a cute name, I guess, but probably a more appropriate, clear definitional name, to the Clean Water, Clean Air, and Green Jobs Environmental Bond Act. That will be before the voters this November. The Bond Act proposes $1.2 billion for restoration and flood risk prevention, $1.1 billion each for climate change mitigation, $650 million for open space conservation and recreation, $650 million for water quality projects and resilient infrastructure, $400 million to restore natural resources and reduce the impacts of climate change. The executive budget also proposes $1 billion to provide affordable broadband access. This is an important part of infrastructure as well, and one that we really must talk about more. We put out a report in the fall from my office on broadband availability and access that found that more than 1 million New York households, 14% of the households in our state, still do not have broadband access, meaning no subscription for services, including cell service. The numbers really are dramatic when you look at New Yorkers that live in rural communities and New Yorkers of lower income. 1 in 3 New York households with income less than $20,000 lacked access to broadband at home. So certainly, to keep our state economically competitive, we need to expand broadband access. Reliable, high-speed internet is a necessity. I think we all agree to that, to work, to communicate, to learn. The fact has never been made more clear than during the pandemic. So many of us at some point have had to turn our homes into schools and workplaces, and certainly, as I'm sure you're discussing in your respective firms, what is going to be the takeaway once we're finally through the time of the pandemic in terms of the reimagined workplace and remote work, and what will that mean for all of us? So broadband access, an important part of the infrastructure discussion. Well, it's also important to just mention New York City because it's such a big player in what we do in our state. The city also is making commitments to historic investments in infrastructure. The city recently released a $147.1 billion 10-year capital plan. With regard to the city, and I'm sure, again, it's something in your firms you talk about a lot, resiliency is top of the mind in the city's plan. And especially after the experience downstate of Hurricane Ida, this really has to be a priority. So housing, parks, transportation as well, all these areas receive significant increases. Another big player, particularly downstate, but affects business opportunities all across the state, the MTA capital plan, over $55 billion, got a boost from those federal monies, drawing down $10.7 billion in federal funding. The MTA, in the depths of the pandemic, truly was on life support. Had it not been for the infusion of federal dollars, I don't know where we would be. Hats off to our congressional delegation, and we are benefiting from Chuck Schumer being the Senate Majority Leader. I don't say that as a political statement, I say that as a reality. So he and his colleagues have been delivering for us. And the MTA also, not only with what it needs to do to provide good service, has had to recognize the impact of climate change has to be incorporated into its capital projects and its capital planning. We continue to do a lot of reports on the MTA. All of our reports are on our website, by the way. And the MTA has had its struggles in not only finding the funding for its capital plans, but when they have the funding, getting the money out the door. And that's been one area, I hope, with the new leadership there, that they'll do a better job of that. But we're going to continue our monitoring of those MTA capital programs. So much of these new state and city infrastructure investments are made possible because of that federal money. So just to point out, under the Federal Infrastructure Act, New York should expect $13.5 billion over 5 years in federal highway formula funding for highways and bridges, $9.8 billion over 5 years to improve public transportation options all across our state, $175 million over 5 years to support the expansion of an electric vehicle charging network in the state. We can also compete for some of the monies that's going to have a little bit of competition attached to it. But there's a $12.5 billion bridge investment program for economically significant bridges, $15 billion of national funding in the law that's dedicated to what they identify as mega projects that will deliver substantial economic benefits to communities. Our state will also benefit from new funding for rail, $22 billion in grants to Amtrak, $24 billion as federal-state partnership grants for the Northeast Corridor modernization, $12 billion for partnership grants for inner-city rail service, including high-speed rail. And again, New York will be able to compete for $5 billion for rail improvement and safety grants. Another $3 billion is going to be available for grade crossing safety improvements. Our airports are slated to receive about $650 million for infrastructure development over the next 5 years. The Act also directs funding to some of the key regional projects, probably some that many of you have been working on: the Gateway Project, the Long Island Railroad East River Tunnels, the 2nd Avenue Subway, and Port Authority renovations. There's a lot in there that we're going to benefit from. All told, this is an unprecedented amount of dedicated infrastructure funding available to our state, to our New York City, and to all of our localities. And that's the infrastructure money. There's also that money from the American Rescue Plan I mentioned earlier, provided additional infusion of federal funds, $5.9 billion to New York City, $4.9 billion to localities outside of New York City. The money in the American Rescue Plan can be used for different purposes, but some of our local governments have already earmarked some of that money for infrastructure projects. So it really is a watershed moment. The funding that we're seeing creates a rare opportunity to make significant progress in building the safe, reliant, modern, world-class infrastructure that our state needs to compete and to thrive. We need to maximize the potential impact of this historic infusion of resources and be prepared for the future, when we will no longer be able to count on this record level of federal funding. And that's really the concern that I've identified along the way, and I will continue to. We can't treat this money like it's forever, because it's not. And that's why we need to be smart and strategic in how we utilize this money and make sure we're spending it appropriately and setting the right priorities, getting the money out the door, and making sure we're not wasting the money and how it's being spent. Planning is very, very important in that regard. And again, that's where our oversight role becomes key. We will continue to do, I mentioned the MTA reporting, but we are stepping up our oversight in terms of capital spending by the different state agencies. We'll be looking at local governments as well. Again, how we have an appropriate inventory of what our needs are, how we set the right priorities, how we make sure that we're spending the money in a responsible way, that to me is key. You know, let me just wrap up by mentioning 2 reports that touch on these areas, one of which we released on Friday, one of which we're releasing tomorrow. So some of you may have seen that on Friday we put out a new report on local roads. Again, all the reports are on the website. We looked at local government spending on roads, $2 billion in 2020. That's local governments outside of New York City. 85% of the roads in New York State are locally owned and maintained. Over the last decade, local government spending on roads actually declined by 7% when you adjust for inflation. So spending in that area, in terms of the absolute number, really has been off of what it should be. And I know particularly during the pandemic time, a lot of the projects were put on the back burner. It really is a time where we need to get back to focusing on spending to maintain our local roads. It's also a concern that when you talk about all the different local governments out there, right, the counties, the cities, the towns, the villages, we don't do as good a job as we should in having an overall assessment as to what the needs are. so that, again, we could do a better job of prioritizing where the money should go. There really hasn't been a comprehensive assessment of local government funding for roads since 2013, so it's time that we had the state work with our local government partners to figure out how we can have a more comprehensive data set on local road conditions. Again, especially because we're receiving these billions of dollars, let's make sure that we are spending the money where we're going to get the greatest benefit from it. The report we're going to be releasing tomorrow looks again, as we've looked in the past, at the state dedicated Bridge and Highway Transportation Fund. The fund was created, I think as many of you know, in 1991. It was intended to provide a reliable, dedicated stream of funding for our state's transportation projects. Unfortunately, it's now largely devoted to repaying past borrowings and supporting current operating costs for state agencies. We first did a report on this problem back in 2008. We updated it in 2014, and I've been very appreciative of the input that ACEC New York has given us on this subject. And as a result of your pressing us, we always include in our annual budget review some comment on where the trust fund is at. But in the report we're releasing tomorrow, we find that the situation continues to be of great concern. From 2012 to 2013 to 2020 to 2021, the dedicated highway and bridge trust fund disbursements for capital projects actually declined by 10.8%. The share of disbursements for operational costs increased from 40.8% to 42.8%, while debt service payments stayed relatively flat at about 40%. Over that period, just $5.3 billion was spent on transportation capital projects, while $12.3 billion was spent on debt service from past borrowings, $13.6 billion spent on operational costs. In that same period, what kept the trust fund afloat has been a greater reliance on transfers from the general fund to cover expenses. By the state fiscal year of 2020-2021, only 17 cents of every dollar spent from the fund supported a new capital investment. That is not what the fund was meant to do. That's not how it was set up. So we really need to change direction again. Now that we are flush with cash, it is an appropriate time for us to put the dedicated Bridge and Highway Trust Fund back on the right track. And again, I've appreciated your organization's input on this as well, and let's work together to get our state policymakers to do a better job of managing that money. Once again, not to repeat, but I will, because it is a mantra that I have said in the past, and now's the time for people to listen to it. When it comes to infrastructure, we need to plan better so we could spend more wisely and more effectively. And again, our role in the Comptroller's office in terms of oversight and monitoring is very important. We take it seriously, and any suggestions that you have on how we could do that job more effectively, we certainly want to hear it. So, I'll restate the obvious: a safe, modern infrastructure, including roads, bridges, tunnels, mass transit, airports, commuter rail, along with upgraded water, wastewater, broadband, and electric, remain essential ingredients to our state's economic success. All of that in the broad category of infrastructure is so key. The work we do in this extraordinary period to shore up these critical areas will have an enormous and I think positive long-term effect, if we do it right, on job creation, economic growth, and certainly quality of life for all New Yorkers. It has certainly been a long 22 months or so, but I believe we may finally be seeing light at the end of the proverbial tunnel. This is a time for members of ACEC New York to shine. This really is your moment. You're the ones that are going to be on the front lines of all of this. We will rely on your expertise, your innovation, your talent. We need your voices at the table, your continued hard work in the field. You are the ones that could really help make the difference to make sure that, in fact, we are planning in a smart way, spending in a smart way, being effective with how we use this unprecedented amount of infrastructure dollars. So I know that you're going to help us make the best of this very unique opportunity. So again, I want to thank you for what you do each and every day to build stronger communities, literally build stronger communities all across our great state, and I wish you all continued success in your very important careers. So thanks so much for listening to me, and if we have time for questions, I'm here. The question was, would I comment on inflation, impact on New York State, impact on the pension fund, the common retirement fund? You know, so obviously inflation is of great concern. It is obviously one of the factors that's rattling the markets right now, and obviously the Fed will be taking some steps, I guess, from what we've read as early as March. Question is, you know, how many steps might they take this year, and what will be the impact of that? I mean, look, the obvious concern is in the short run, inflation is driving up costs and eating into the earning power of all of us, and eating into the ability of government to spend and get, you know, the most for the money. So, you know, I think when you went back a few months ago, it seemed that most of the experts said, you know, it's a temporary blip on inflation. It seems that that temporary blip is not as temporary as the experts had thought, right? It remains to be seen what will happen as far as the Fed action. You know, in the short run, I think the volatility in the markets is certainly tied to concern about inflation and what the Feds are going to do in response to it. So I think, you know, in terms of New York State, it's a concern. A lot of it's out of our control because we don't you know, control the federal monetary policy in that regard, or the fiscal policy in that regard. In terms of the pension fund, it's an interesting question. So whenever the markets get rattled, and certainly if they have a down day, and we saw some big down days, you know, what hair I have left, you know, starts to fall out a little bit. But also I've learned in my many years as controllers that we don't value the fund. We're not day traders, right? So we don't look, you know, on a given down day, because there's always then an up day, as we've seen also this past week. You know, to the extent that the inflation factor negatively affects markets, and then markets go down in terms of, let's say, public equities, or increased costs for that might impact, let's say, real estate or private equity investments, you know, there is an upside to it. The upside is that, aside from public equities, right, the stocks you'd all be familiar with, which is the biggest part of our portfolio, we're very diversified, right? So we don't put all our eggs in one basket. So the second largest part of our retirement fund portfolio is in fixed income. And why? Because it's the safest place to have money, right? So when you're managing money for people's retirement, you want it to be as safe as possible. The reality is, if we just had all our money in treasuries, the amount of tax revenue we'd need to support those pensions would probably make the plan unsustainable, right? So therefore, we have money invested in stocks, real estate, private equity, and so on. But we still have, you know, in our target, probably at this point a little under, you know, a third of our portfolio dedicated to fixed income. If the inflation will continue to be a factor, hopefully at a less number than it is right now, but we'll start to see the rates go up where we could actually make some more money on the fixed income piece, you know, that's a little bit of a positive for us. So it's never like one clear, oh, this is bad. You know, some of it's bad, some of it's good. How will it all come out? It's why for the pension fund we have an asset allocation that we have a lot of confidence in. And what we were able to do, you know, I mentioned earlier that we had a record year with that 33% return. So we did a couple of things with that. One of them is that we reduced the contribution rate we charge to government employers, which is good news to you as taxpayers, right? Because the government employer contributions to the pension fund are tax dollars. But we did something else, and not to get too technical on pension fund management, but we lowered our assumed rate of return. So what do I mean by that? Pension fund has a long-term goal of what we think we're going to make on our investments. And when I started as controller, we had an 8% goal, long-term goal. We dropped it to 7.5, we dropped it to 7, we dropped it to 6.8. And what we did when we had these historic gains is that, you know, we said maybe it's time, because of the volatility that we saw emerging, to lower our long-term goal even more. So we're now actually at a 5.9% long-term assumed rate of return. I think there's only one other state pension fund that's below 6% as a long-term goal. So what I'm trying to explain is that we position the fund in a more conservative way, so that even if, driven by inflation, the markets get skittish, and even if at fixed income, even if there might be a slight bump up in rates, it still will be a low area in terms of generating return. We're not making a big bet on what I would consider to be an unrealistic, assumed rate of return. And the good news is we were able to do all this and still have the plan over 99% funded. So I guess the bottom line to what I'm saying is I think for the pension fund, we positioned it well to weather what is going to be a time of volatility, much of it driven by questions about inflation. I can't see, so is it the lights? There, it's Rick, okay. Oh, thanks. Chairman Rick.
Comptroller DiNapoli, thank you so much for your comments. We couldn't agree more that we need to make wise investments because funds aren't going to last forever. We couldn't agree more with you. And we take up your offer to have a seat at the table and then promise to keep that seat down for the next 5 years. But I do have a question. You thank you gave a really good report of the governor's budget, and you also gave a fairly rosy view of revenue. You've been down this road before with budgets, and where they start, where they end. And in some years, maybe the fiscal challenges were worse than they are now. Is this budget going to go through with breeze?
So the question was, given how good the revenue picture is right now, will the governor's budget go through in a breeze or in an easy way? So this is Albany, and it's an election year. So I think actually, maybe a light wind rather than a breeze, but here, there are a couple things happening. First of all, a non-budgetary comment. My sense is in this town, there's been a big sigh of relief over the past few months. And I think Governor Hochul's personal style has made a big difference in that regard. And I think at the end of the day, while legislators certainly, and I was one for 20 years, have their own agenda, their own advocacy for their districts, at the end of the day, they're also flesh and blood human beings. And I think the fact that there has not been as the contentious overlay that was kind of there before, if I could put it diplomatically, I think the governor starts out with a lot of goodwill, and I think that'll make a big difference. I think that there's still a ways to go, but different from other budgets, and we're still doing our deep dive. We'll do our budget review that we always put out on the proposed budget. There's not a lot of extra stuff added. Very often there are items that are beyond just dollars and cents added into a budget that become very contentious. And one of the problems in the past has often been controversial issues are folded into the budget document. They take all the time and debate and attention, and one of my frustrations has been nobody really looks at how the numbers are adding up because they're too busy debating these other issues, and then they close down a budget last minute, and they haven't really thought as well about long-term implications of some of the spending choices. So I think the budget will be done on time. I've been through a fair number of budgets, and I know sometimes it's a challenge to get a budget done when you don't have enough money, and sometimes it's a challenge when you got too much money and everybody wants to spend it, again, especially in an election year. But I just have a feeling folks around here have a desire to work together to get this done right. So, you know, what's interesting, the big, you know, last minute item usually is education, because that's always, you know, after healthcare, the big expense item in the budget, and very much tied to each region's needs in that area. And, you know, nobody ever thinks they get their fair share of state aid, right? Everybody's always fighting over that. So that's usually like the last piece of the budget. What's interesting is that in this budget, the governor has put on the table a big increase in education, fulfilling the goal to have the foundation aid formula fully realized. You know, my guess is the legislature will add some money to education, but I don't think you're going to see education as the big end of session holding up the budget, you know, negotiations. So yeah, I think the budget will pass relatively easily. You know, the big question mark out there, which is separate from the budget, I don't know to what extent it may distract from the budget discussion, is obviously the concern about gun violence, issues about bail reform that seems to take up a lot of debate. You know, will some of that, you know, have an impact on budget discussions? I don't think so. This week, the legislature is supposed to vote on the redistricting for the Senate and Assembly lines and the congressional lines. That's going to be a big focus, and will obviously set the stage for the elections in the fall. I think at the end of the day, I think the budget will pass on time and not be as contentious as past budgets. Because for the first time in anybody's memory, instead of a budget that projects out-year gaps in the billions of dollars, this budget doesn't project any gaps for the next 5 years. We've never had that before. And I think with that kind of a backdrop, that's good news. You know, the question is going to be, will that all hold up, right? Well, we don't know what the future's going to hold. If you had said 2 years ago, you know, in your budget planning, figure on a pandemic, and how is that going to, you know? So what's going to be the next, right? You know, 2 years or 3 years from now, we don't know. What's going to happen in Washington, right? Politically, again, I'm not saying this in a partisan way, but you know, under the current administration and with the current makeup in the House and the Senate, a lot of money came to New York. A lot of money came to other states as well. A lot of talk that there's going to be a change in terms of who's controlling what down there. What will that mean in terms of additional federal money and federal policy? So there's still a lot, and then the obvious, what will all this mean for the economic recovery? We're assuming at this point that the recovery and the job regrowth will continue. So that is, the goal would be that as the federal money gets spent down, the economy is picking up, so instead of 63% of the jobs recovered, we'll have 100%. We'll have 110%, even more jobs than we had in 2019. What if that doesn't happen? I mean, what if the revenue picture changes dramatically? Again, that's why building up the reserves, which we haven't done well in the past, I think is a very key part of what the governor's plan is about. That gives me a lot of comfort. So more than you probably wanted from that question, but I gave you the full menu.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Comptroller DiNapoli, for that informational presentation. I appreciated that very much. We do go back 30 years. I worked for Assemblyman Dick Connors in seat number 1, and right next to Assemblyman Connors in seat number 2 is Assemblyman DiNapoli. So we really appreciate having you here. It's good to have a good friend of ACEC here. So thanks again, Comptroller. Now, that concludes the first day of the winter conference. The Risk Strategies Hospitality Suite is now open downstairs in the exhibit hall. I encourage all of you to stop by, enjoy some networking and fun, and be sure to continue to bid on the ACEC PAC silent auction items. Virtual attendees, bidding is open to you as well. Visit the link in your confirmation email to submit your bids. As a reminder, breakfast will be served tomorrow morning beginning at 7 a.m. in the first floor exhibit hall. The Industry Concerns and Best Practices Open Forum will run from 8 a.m. till 9 a.m. in the pre-function room next to this room. Concurrently, the HR track will meet in 2B, the Emerging Leaders track in 2C, the CFO track in the Capitol Room. The keynote session with Charles Doherty of Wells Fargo Securities will begin at 9:15 a.m. in this room, so enjoy the rest of your evening, and I can't let you go without saying thank you for braving the snow in the cold. The frogs and locusts will be here at midnight, and I can't leave you without saying Ray D'Adazio says, remember, progressive design build. Enjoy your evening, everybody. Thank you.